Hello and welcome to the Ruby and Pearls Knitting Podcast. My name is Lea. I'm coming to you from West Wales in the UK, where I live with my partner and our 2 dogs. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today is a very grey and dreary day here in Wales. I'm filming this on the 4th of February 2025 and I've positioned myself slightly differently today in the hopes that the light coming through the window will help a little bit, because my overhead lighting is a little bit too yellow in order for me to show you things more accurately. So yes, welcome. Thank you for joining. If you're new, thank you for clicking on this video. Maybe go back and watch some of my previous videos so you know what kind of content I create. And if you are a returning viewer, thank you so much. I really appreciate all your likes and comments and messages on social media. You can find me as Lea and I'm on Ravelry and on Instagram. I am not particularly active on Ravelry because I don't find it that user friendly, but I'm very active on Instagram, so drop me a message if you would like to have a chat. And yeah, let's get started. To start off with, I have got a couple of, well, 3 make-alongs I would like to talk to you about. So a little bit of admin before we talk about finished objects and works in progress today. The first make-along that I am part of is one I am hosting with my lovely friend Emily from Emily Knits. I will leave her channel linked down below. And we decided that we would like to host a make-along called the Get Ahead Mal. The idea behind the Get Ahead Mal is that where we live in the UK, the summer is fairly short and temperamental, and the time when you can actually wear a summer garment that you might have knitted is quite short. And so by the time it gets warm here, where we might feel in the mood to knit something or crochet something or sew something for the summer, by the time the project is finished, unfortunately the summer is usually up, because a lot of summer items take longer to knit because they're on much finer gauges. So what we would like to do is to start early. So basically we can start now. The make-along has been running for a couple of weeks. It's very informal. Just use the hashtag, I'll put it on the screen here, GetAheadMal, and tag us both please on your Instagram posts. You can also email pictures or DM pictures to Emily. She has offered that that's an option as well. And we will have some prizes. We're not quite sure yet. It's very casual. It will run again until the end of March, but I'm now thinking we're already in February. Maybe we'll extend it to April. We will see. I apologise if you can hear my belly rumbling, but I'm filming this in the morning and my 2 dogs are on the floor next to me, but they're very sleepy at the moment, so hopefully they won't make too much of a racket. Okay, second make-along that I would like to talk about is the Midland Cal. And in celebration of the Midland Cal, I am wearing my Midland. So the colours will be very badly represented in today's terrible lighting. But this is the iconic Midland cardigan by Laura Penrose, which I'm sure you've come across. I'm sure you watch Laura on YouTube and follow her on social media. She is a wonderful designer and content creator, and this design is incredible. And it took a long time to come out, but it was definitely worth the wait, and I was extremely fortunate to be part of her testing group, which I'm very grateful for, because I have sample knit for Laura in the past, and she almost wanted to ask me to sample knit a different colour for her in this pattern, but she decided that it would be nicer for me to have my own version and to knit my own version in the test knit. This is my Midland cardigan. I knit mine in Drops Fiesta in the shade Rainbow Sprinkles? Yes, Rainbow Sprinkles, which is a colourway that is often sold out because I think it's probably the most popular. And I don't know if I can show you properly, but it's coming out, it's blowing out quite a bit. See, maybe that is more accurate. It is a bit darker than you can see on screen. And it is really cool because it has this sort of hand-dyed effect whilst not being hand-dyed and not having the hand-dyed price tag. It is a superwash sock yarn in DK weight, so I think it's, I might be wrong, 75-25 merino? Not merino, I think it's just wool nylon. I will put on screen what the composition of the yarn is. So this can actually go in the washing machine. I have just pulled this out of the machine day before yesterday and laid it, just smushed it around, laid it flat to dry. You've got to spend a little bit more time with superwash items when you're blocking them to make sure that they retain their shape. And if they've stretched out massively, just gently smoosh them back together. That's the technical term. So that's what I've done. It's just freshly dried, so I've popped it on. And I know that Laura doesn't recommend that you use a yarn with loads of drape or superwash, but I've had a great experience with this yarn. I just wanted to give it a go, and I don't know if it's because it is it has nylon in it. Does that give it more sort of spring back and durability than like a 100% merino superwash? I'm not sure, so try that at your own risk. The only difference between my sample and the finished pattern, as you can see, my sleeves are extremely fitted. There were a lot of adjustments made in the sleeve instructions in the pattern after the test knit. When the test knit started, I knit this in a week because I was a little bit obsessed with the colour, the pattern, everything. It's tremendous fun to knit. And when she released the pattern, it skyrocketed up the charts on Ravelry, as it really deserves to be there. And I could see that loads of people wanted to knit one, and loads of people want to knit another one that have test knit, as far as I'm aware, myself included. So I wanted to host my own make along, a knit along in this case, because it's just for this pattern. And it will run until the end of June. So you've got loads and loads of time to finish off other items first, gather your yarn, think about joining. I will leave a link down below to the Discord channel that I have created for this knit along. You can also use the hashtag Midland Cal on Instagram, but as a whole, the main thing is to join on the Discord, have a chat with other knitters. And the main reason I wanted to run this is because I really wanted to encourage people who are a bit intimidated by this pattern to join in, because it's not difficult. I know Laura explains it as an intermediate pattern because there's quite a lot going on, but when you sort of split it into little chunks, it's not that challenging. And for that reason, I would really encourage you, if you're a bit intimidated, to join the chat, because there is a channel on the Discord where you can ask questions from other knitters. You're also very welcome to send me a DM on Instagram, also on Instagram, but mainly on Discord. If you get stuck and you want some help, some one-to-one sort of help with this pattern, that is something I'm offering on there, and I'm really excited. And I will be knitting another one, but I just want to clear my needles a little bit more before I get started. The third and final knit along that I'm part of is called the Spring Musselburgh Cal. It is hosted by lovely Rekka from Whip Wonderland. Yes, that is her channel and her Instagram name. And it's a very informal chat group on Instagram where we talk about our Musselburgh hats that we are knitting, and she just encouraged other people who are also knitting one to take part, and I so happen to have cast a new one on, so I thought I would join in on that. If you head to her Instagram page, you will be able to see how to join in, and you can also send her a message if you would like to join the chat. Which nicely transitions us into works in progress, doesn't it? I will start with works in progress today because that makes more sense. I'll show you finished object at the end. So my first whip is a Musselburgh hat. And I am knitting mine. I'll show you. I hope these colours will show up, but they probably won't. See it there in the yarn. And hopefully, there we are. I am knitting this in a Spectrum Fibre skein of yarn in their fingering weight, sock weight yarn. I don't know the colourway because I bought it in a D-stash, and I was so excited to be able to purchase this because it was already balled up. I didn't even have to get my winder out and start swearing at my winder because there's always tangles and messes, and anyway, I don't enjoy winding yarn is the bottom line. So I have made some steady progress. I try to put a few rows into my Musselburgh every day, and I think Spring Musselburgh Cal really works well for this yarn because it reminds me of spring and it's making me really happy to work on. For those of you unfamiliar with this pattern, this is a pattern by Isolda Teague, and it is one of the most popular patterns out there. It is high up on the charts all the time, and for good reason, because this is a would you call it gaugeless or just more swatchless? It is a swatchless hat pattern. Now, I never swatch for a hat. I just cast on and hope for the best and check my gauge as I go. But the interesting thing about the Musselburgh is that you can use varying degrees of yarn weight. So you can knit this, I believe, all the way from light fingering to Aran weight. All you have to do is pick a yarn that you want to use, pick a needle you are comfortable using with that yarn, and you start at the top with a sort of pinhole type cast on, which is extremely fiddly, be warned. So you start there and you start increasing out at these 4 points, and once you have a bit of fabric, so I think maybe up to there, where you can comfortably measure an inch between these increase lines, that's when you can determine what gauge you are knitting at. And when you've determined that, you can then check in the table on the pattern how many increases you are supposed to work for your gauge, which means that you can knit this for, I think there is baby all the way to adult extra large sizing, and with any of those yarn weights. Apologies for the interruption. I have gained a dog. My parents like watching my podcast and they've requested to see more of the dogs. So she's got a smushy little face. So Pearl felt the need to alert me to something. And since then I've made a coffee, got too hot for knitwear. And now I'm back. And this is little Ruby. And she's a very cuddly, very sweet girl. I think I finished talking about the Musselburgh, but I'm not entirely sure. So a quick dog interception while she's so comfortable. I thought I would quickly talk about my dogs. So this is Ruby. She is about 18 months old, a little bit under. She is a Cavapoo. Her mum was a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel and her dad was a poodle, or is, they're still around, I just don't know them. And she came to us as a 12-week-old puppy, and she's got a very funny personality. She is the strangest dog I've ever known. She only wants attention when she wants attention. She's not into fuss at all, unless it's on her terms. She can be very loving, but she can also decide that she doesn't want to be near you, and then she will just disappear and go upstairs and take herself to bed. She's a very strange character, but we love her for it. And she's quite timid and shy and submissive at home, and then you take her to the woods and she turns into a crazy squirrel. Don't you, Roo? Now go down. There you go. Good girl. Come on, Pearly. Pearly, come on. And this is the crazy Pearl. I'm not going to pick her up because she weighs 20 kilos. But she is a Welsh Collie crossed with a Labradoodle that happened to turn into a blue merle coloured mongrel. And she is absolutely stunning and a little bit nutty, aren't you? A little bit nutty. Good girl. You're going to go down. Come on. Right, lay down then. Right, where were we? I'm going to carry on with my other whips. My next whip you haven't seen yet, but I've put quite a lot of progress into it this morning. And it is called the Mimi cardigan by a designer that goes by katandleni on Instagram, but her full name comes up when you click on her profile and it's Katharina von Blumenthal. So my best guess is that she's German or Germanic. And she put an interesting Instagram story up the other day saying that Yarn Pond now won't allow you to access the page and create a page where you look for test knitters if you're based in the UK because of Brexit. So the joys continue. And she was asking for some test knitters that would be willing to test knit her children's pattern. So this is a top down saddle shoulder, no, not saddle shoulder, drop shoulder, kind of. I think it's a modified sort of drop shoulder going into set in sleeve. Kind of hard to show. Cardigan. And it features a double knit button band. I say button band, it doesn't have buttons. It will have little bows that you tie at the front. There will be 2. So this is a little bit difficult to show, but there we are. That's where we're at. I'm working down the front here now, doing the double knitting. And then there will be sleeves going here and here. There we are. And I'm really enjoying this, but it's taking me a little bit longer than you'd think it would at this massive gauge of, I think, 13 stitches, because I'm holding Yarnsmith's Lagoon double. It is this lovely colour changing yarn here. And I'm holding a double to get gauge, and it was in my stash because I purchased it for a blanket. I think it was a knit along, sorry, crochet along that I decided to take part in that I quickly lost interest in. But I kept the yarn because I thought this would be a colour my little niece might enjoy. So I'm knitting this cardigan for her, and by next time I will probably have finished this. I'm just going to have to work down the button band, you know what I mean, and the sleeves, and then put some bows on and I-cord, and then it will be finished. And I'm really, really enjoying this, but it's quite hard on my hands. A 13 stitch gauge is hard on my hands. So I think the original, I can't remember what it was knit in, but it was more sort of a thinner yarn with fluff, so it creates more of a drapey fabric. This is quite dense. I hope it will sort of drape a bit after blocking, but I'm envisioning this a little bit more as a coat for her rather than a cardigan in the traditional sense. Moving on to my third and final whip, I should put a disclaimer in that I have loads more whips, they just don't get any work. So I will only ever show you what's actively being worked on. And that can change by next week. The third one is also a test knit, and this is for lovely Marie from Greenermakes. And this is the wonderful knit Purl Repeat sweater, which is currently in testing. I'm going to try and get a nice shot. We'll see if I can get a thumbnail from this. Probably not, but there we are. The knit Purl Repeat sweater. It is a top-down saddle shoulder construction. So it features these lovely saddle shoulders that you knit first and then put on hold. This is where the sleeves are going to be picked up from. Last night I added the collar, and that really brought it together. And I have finished all of the colour work, which is looking a little bit lumpy, especially last time we spoke. I showed you that I just started the colour work, and I had to work some colour work flat, which is something I've not done before. And it is a lot easier than I thought it would be, but it was extremely hard for me to keep my purl tension on English style knitting. I am a continental knitter. I always knit continental unless it's colour work, in which case I knit two-handed. And my English knit stitch has become pretty decent in tension. The purl stitch is god-awful. So it was very lumpy. I've done a lot of sort of pulling on stitches to try and even it out. But it's still not perfect. And then these kind of things that look simple in terms of colour work, it's actually quite hard to get a good tension. And I'm going to show you something as a for example, because there's a bit of a trade-off that happens with colour work. So if you look at this section here next to the T, it's nice and smooth. I think the tension looks pretty good. But on the inside, we have some pretty long floats that I might catch my finger on when I'm trying to put the jumper on. And because I'm knitting this in a synthetic yarn, these floats won't felt together on the inside and sort of create more of a fabric rather than strands that can get caught on. The alternative you have is to catch floats, but then something like this happens. As you can see, if you've got high contrast, which is something that's quite often desirable in colourwork knitting to make the image pop, you end up with the other strand poking through, which is what you can see here. So there's a bit of a trade-off, which is better. I personally prefer not to catch my floats too often for that exact reason, because I don't like it poking through. Even with rustic wool yarns, I feel like you can still see it. And if there are massive gaps between colour chunks, I will use the ladder back jacquard method, which is something I recently learned, and I highly recommend that you check out some videos to find out how to do that, because more graphic, modern looking colour work that isn't loads of little motifs will require you to catch extremely long floats. And if they're massive, if they're like this, I do think, you know, everybody should catch them, because there's just too much risk of being caught in them and then pulling on the knitting and making it uneven. So what I actually did in the uneven spots, so for example, this bit here was knit flat before the armholes were joined there. And I would go through and tighten up the stitches that were loose, and then I'd end up with a massive loop of excess yarn, which I just caught like a float on the inside here, as you can see there, that one there, when I carried on knitting. Now that looks extremely ugly, but you'll never know from the right side, will you? So there we are. See that? And this pattern is so much fun to knit. I am really enjoying it. I can't wait to wear this. It is currently now my mindless stockinette knitting, because there's quite a chunk of plain coloured knitting to happen after the wording. And it's really inspired me to think about more graphic colour work in my own designs. So there might be something like that coming in my future. I'm using, this yarn is Shapier Scrumptious in the shade Honeydew Melon Sorbet, and the pink is Rico Design Baby DK. Both of these yarns are, I believe, a acrylic polyamide blend. They're very soft, they're very easy care, and I can envision myself living in this jumper around the house mostly, but maybe also out the house. We will see how I feel. So I'm really grateful that it will be easy care. You might be able to tell, if you know anything about colour dominance in colour work, the way you hold the yarn when you're knitting colour work is important. The most important thing is to always hold one colour in one hand, the other colour in the other hand, and not switch. Equally, if you're knitting just with one hand, when you're dropping colours, not to rotate these colours, they're always in the same position, because that will create a more consistent fabric. But in colour dominance, the idea is that your contrast colour is always coming from below, in my case, held in the left continental hand, which is what I did for the pink, because I wanted it to pop, but it isn't popping. As you can see here, you can definitely see the green pops more, the stitches are much larger, and that is because my English style knitting, which is how I'm holding this green, is slightly looser, and this yarn is slightly thicker than the pink, because they're not the same yarn, and that has created a sort of unexpected colour dominance for the one that's actually not being held dominant. So that's just something to keep in mind that you might want to keep an eye on. If your English and continental style knitting are quite different in tension, this is all about practice, isn't it? But I don't think my English style knitting will ever have the same tension as my continental knitting. Time for some coffee. It's going to be a slightly shorter episode today, but what I'm trying to do is to film a video every week if I can, if I have time, if I have the day off, because I think having shorter sort of 20-25 minute videos might be quite nice to watch in amongst the sea of massive videos. And then if I have something extra to share, obviously it might end up a bit longer, but that's kind of what I'm planning. But I'm planning to come to you a bit more frequently and have shorter videos. That's basically what I'm trying to say. Let's finish with my finished object, which is not how I normally do these videos, but that's how it's worked out today. This is the Upland scarf by, I think she's called the Wool Barrow. I will put it on screen here. And by the way, if you see me pointing at the screen when I say I'm putting things on screen, this is a bit of a editing aid for me so that I know when to insert things. Because I think there's nothing more annoying than watching a knitting podcast and people say, oh, I'm going to put a picture in here, and then no picture turns up. So I'm trying my best to make sure I'm actually putting in what I'm promising. But anyway, I knit this scarf in 2 skeins of needle and thread in a single ply base that I don't have the colour of, that I bought in a sale, held double, and 2 skeins of yarn undyed, also unknown name, held double as well, because this is a DK weight scarf. And I honestly don't know how I'm going to show this. Let's start with where I started. You start at the tip here, and you increase out, and then eventually you join another colour and do some intarsia and increase out a bit further. So that's section 2. For section 3, you knit straight. Now I knit my section 3 a little bit shorter because she gives guidance on how much of the yarn should be used up at this point in order to make sure you have enough. You then carry on in the straight section where I joined my second skein, and I spoke about this last time. They looked so similar, I really didn't think I needed to alternate skeins or hold them together. But clearly there's a very big difference. It's not going to bother me as a scarf, but if it was a garment, that would be a big problem. So please, 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 hand-dyed yarn, always alternate. Unless you like this kind of effect. So then, let me see if I can show this. The next chunk is done, oh, that's a bit easier, where you increase the blue, the dark blue, and decrease the light blue out like this. And then you basically do the opposite on the other end. So you have another straight section there. No, still decreasing out. You have another straight section there, where they both just stay the same before you start tapering out and you lose the contrast colour and you finish like this. Now you'll probably be able to see that I did run out of the light blue yarn, but I found a yarn in my stash. I am not 100% sure, but I think it was from Frankie Gray Fibres, which is a yarn dyer in Canada, run by Jodie from the Grocery Girls. And I believe the base looked extremely similar. They were both like a 2-ply and sort of very similar in texture. And I just very quickly faded that in and finished that off. And it has a speckle, and I quite like it. I think when it's laying flat, I find it a bit annoying that I've got all these different colours going on. And I used nearly all of my teal colour, but I had a bit more than 2 skeins because I bought a skein previously. So I think the measurements for me, maybe my gauge is off, because let's be honest, did I swatch? It's a scarf, I didn't swatch. So I would definitely knit this again, but I would be a bit more mindful of having a little bit more yarn. And the other thing, the end bit, I think there's an error in the pattern. I might be wrong, but I'm going to look at it again today with fresh eyes and see. And if I do think there's an error, I'm going to get in touch with the designer, because I think it's a really wonderful pattern and it was a real joy to knit. And I think this is my first scarf that I've ever knit since when I was a kid, when I had to knit a massively long scarf in school, and I was not very impressed that my teacher wanted me to knit garter stitch for hours. I have got some I have got some shawls that are more of a scarf shape, but I don't really wear them. But this is genuinely meant to be a scarf, meant to be worn as a scarf. So I actually almost like the wrong side more, because on the wrong side the join looks neater than on the right side, because you create this sort of braided effect with a joining stitch in the intarsia. I don't know if you can see that. But I haven't tried it on since blocking. So you can see there's the tip. Let's see how many times I can wrap this around. There's the 2 tips. I think if I tie a knot there, it is huge. I think it could do with being a little bit smaller because of the width of this scarf, and that's just personal preference obviously, but because this scarf is so wide, I don't feel the need to wrap this around my neck twice. but I think I will have to, because otherwise the ends will hang out underneath my coat, and I think that's a really weird look. So this is probably a scarf I will be wearing more as it gets warmer, weirdly, because I can then wear just a jumper and put this on, and I can just wrap it around me when I get cold, or just wear it like this. And I think that will look a little bit better than trying to get this under a thick coat. We will see. But I'm very pleased with it. It's very cozy, it's very soft. And I finally got my sort of Sophie shawl-esque scarf without having knit the Sophie shawl. I do own the pattern, it is a great pattern, but it is, you know, extremely well used. Loads of people have knit it, and I'm glad that I was able to knit something similar but different. And from a smaller designer, which is something I really like to support. I've actually had a bit of a chat with a friend about petite knit in general, and we came up with some interesting thoughts recently, because I have noticed that some podcasters that have only just started podcasting have got a vast amount of views and followers, and almost always it seems that it's because they knit a lot of petite knit. Maybe also my favourite thing is knitwear, but a lot of petite knit patterns in a lot of beautiful neutral colours, and very much follow that sort of Scandi aesthetic, and that seems to really hit well on YouTube. Now, I am not going to knit a petite knit pattern just for the sake of trying to see whether that gains any kind of traction, because that's not really why I'm filming these videos. But I do like a petite knit pattern, and I am, as you can see, currently just knitting from other people's patterns. I'm taking a little bit of a pause on designing, mostly because I've got a few designs that need a lot of admin doing too, and it's not really worth me knitting another item before I actually get these patterns written up, really, and tech edited and get them test knit. So I'm currently enjoying knitting from other people. There will probably be a petite knit pattern in my future. I am eyeing up the Dagmar Zipper sweater. Dagmar Zipper sweater. Bloody hell, that was hard to say. So that is something that I might knit in the future, and if that changes how many people view my video, I will let you know, because I think it's interesting in terms of analytics, not because I'm going to be doing it to, you know, influence any kind of numbers in that way. But I thought that was quite an interesting conversation, because we all know how vastly popular petite knit is, for a very good reason, and I really enjoy her patterns. And I've got nothing bad to say about her patterns. But it is almost a bit of a monopoly situation, isn't it? Where she has so much, what would you call it? She is so influential. There are so many of her patterns that are constantly being knit by so many people, that quite often you end up finding a new podcaster and they're just knitting yet another petite knit pattern. And it's really popular for very good reason. But I think what I'm trying to say is I would like to knit more from smaller designers and encourage people to knit more from smaller designers, so that they get a little bit of visibility. And if you see a petite knit pattern that you like, absolutely knit it. It's a great, they're all really fantastically written and very wearable patterns. I really enjoy them. So that's a little side tangent. Let me know what you think of this video. I would love to hear from you. I will put below information about all our knit alongs and make alongs, and if you'd like to join, please do. I will also link the Discord chat for the Midland cardigan cal. I'm just calling it the Midland cal. And yeah, hopefully I will speak to you again next week if I get around to it. Actually, come to think of it, I think I am working next week an extra day, so you might not see me for 2 weeks. In which case this might be a slightly longer video and some more finished objects, but definitely some new cast-ons, because who am I kidding? I'm always casting new things on. So thank you so much for watching, and see you soon.